Please welcome to the stage District Governor-elect John Mogger from Rotary District 7630.
What a great way to start our session this morning with a real Baltimore welcome. Special welcome this morning to all the visiting local Rotarians who are with us for just today. We trust everyone had an enjoyable evening last night with your classes. We had a ball. Today's opening session is all about telling your story. Rotarians for far too long have been too quiet about all the good we do in the world. Rotary President Jennifer is traveling the world spotlighting impactful projects that Rotarians do. Our Rotary Public Image Coordinators spend time and energy helping us learn the most effective and efficient ways to get your stories out into the public. And hopefully we have PI chairs in our district who are letting our local communities know all the good we do. Our three presenters this morning are master storytellers. And as they tell us their stories, we're sure to learn some of their secrets of getting the word out. Before we do, however, I'd like to introduce my fellow classmate and captain, District Governor-elect Renee Stubbs of District 7750, who will share her Rotary moment.
Good morning. Rotary saved my life. I was driving to work one morning about 9 o'clock and was in a horrific car accident with a wrong lane driver who had fallen asleep. Here's the short version. She was headed straight for me and my lane, and I had no escape other than to drive into a deep ditch or let her hit me. We collided. I'll never forget that sound. I was knocked unconscious. My car stopped, of course. I was knocked unconscious. Her car burst into flames. It was like a scene from a movie. The loud sound, the crash, the flames. I could hardly breathe. I was in a lot of pain. We were the only two cars on the road. We were out in the country. Total strangers were helping her out of her burning car, cutting her seatbelt, and I could hear her little voice saying, "Help me, help me." Finally, the fire trucks and the ambulances came, and they took us to the trauma center. Somehow we both survived, but with some injuries that took a while to heal, and some PTSD. So how did Rotary save my life? That day was a Rotary meeting. It was at a location down a dirt road. We were dedicating a picnic shelter for our disability center. On any other day, I would have been driving my little red car, probably with the top down, and I think things would have been much worse for me in that collision. This horrible accident changed so much of my life. It made me question, why was I kept alive? Shortly after that time, I received a phone call, and I was invited to interview and later chosen to be district governor. Maybe that was the answer to my question. I see this invitation to speak to you as an opportunity to share each day, each moment in service to others, and to perhaps to help someone in this room recognize how important life is. Do not wait for a life-changing moment to decide how you, too, can make a difference through Rotary, and see each day as an opportunity to really live another day. Thank you.
Tale as old as time. You've no doubt heard that phrase. Tales and storytelling have been a part of society for over 36,000 years. Storytelling builds connection. It compels people to join a movement, take action. Stories can literally help us change the world. Our speaker this morning knows all too well the power of storytelling. Jeffrey Kluger is editor-at-large of Time magazine, where he's written more than 45 cover stories. He's the author of 12 books, including Apollo 13, which was the basis for the 1995 movie, The Sibling Effect, and his latest novel, Holdout. In his 2005 book, Splendid Solution, Jonas Salk and the Conquest of Polio, Kluger chronicles Dr. Salk's race against time to achieve an unparalleled breakthrough that made him a cultural hero and an icon of modern medicine. As a consummate storyteller, Jeffrey Kluger is going to help all of us learn to tell our story so we can change the world too. Please welcome Jeffrey Kluger.
Having me. It's a privilege to be here. I came in from New York late last night, and I've been looking forward to this for a long time. I wanted to start with a little bit about Jonas Salk himself. Salk was not a man who engaged in the silly business of doodling. We all doodle from time to time. The random drawing during the endless meeting, the idle scribble on a scrap of paper during a seemingly interminable telephone call. But Salk, he had little time for it. I can't pretend to have known Jonas Salk well. Indeed, I can't pretend to have known him at all. I know his sons, Peter, Darrell, and Jonathan, physicians all, like their celebrated father. I know his biography, his upbringing and education and family, and most important, his handiwork, a vaccine against one of nature's most feared diseases. But I never met Salk. He died in 1995. I did not begin work on my book, Splendid Solution, until 2002. A mortal gulf of 7 years thus separated us. And so in the course of my long research for that book, I never got to interview the man himself. Still, I feel that I got to know Salk at least a little bit during the course of that work. On the ground floor of the Geisel Library on the campus of the University of California, San Diego, is a climate-controlled room in which the private collection of Jonas Salk's papers are kept. It's a massive trove. The collection fills 683 slate gray file boxes and is made up of lab notes, memos, correspondence, telegrams, scientific papers, contracts, research proposals, writings, lectures, interviews, photographs, awards, newspapers, clippings, and more. The collection covers the period from 1916, 2 years after Salk's birth, to 1995, the year of his death. I spent many, many long days immersed in that collection, and in all of the pages, in all of the notebooks and other records I read through, I encountered just a single stray doodle in the margin of a lab notebook filled with Salk's handwriting. It was a small triangle traced over 3 or 4 times, which I pictured him scratching onto the page as he pondered some abstruse question of viral science. That, to my knowledge, was the totality of the body of artwork Jonas Salk left to the world. Then it was back to his research. And what painstaking and complicated research it was. The lab book I was reading through that day involved the results of a study testing whether a single adjuvant or immune system stimulant Salk was considering using in one of his vaccines showed any liver toxicity in mice. When a day's or a week's, or for all I knew, a month's work involves a detail so small, you are about as far from actually developing a working polio vaccine as you are from building a skyscraper when you've just baked your first small pile of bricks. But that was the kind of monomaniacal focus Salk needed to have to defeat a disease that threatened tens of thousands of American children every summer. And that was the kind of monomaniacal focus he displayed. It wasn't just such dedication to his labors that moved me when it came to Salk. I was touched by other, less technical things that make me feel personally connected to the man, and this is where storytelling comes in. I may never have met Jonas Salk, but I was born on May 21st, 1954, during the very season in the very year of the great field trial of Salk's then experimental vaccine, a field trial that saw more than 600,000 American children step forward to receive either Salk's ingenious new potion or a placebo injection that would serve as a control for the study. It took close to a year before the results of that field trial could be analyzed and the effectiveness of the new vaccine known. And it wasn't until April 12, 1955, the 10th year anniversary of the death of FDR, President Roosevelt, who died of polio, or who died after contracting polio, that Dr. Thomas Francis, Salk's mentor and the director of the field trial, could step before an audience in Rackham Hall on the campus of the University of Michigan to announce the results. Every seat in the room was taken. Standees lined the aisles and leaned against the walls. Newsreel teams and television crews had poured in early that morning, and carpenters hastily built a long platform on the back of the auditorium to give the battery of cameras a place to stand. Francis's address was a long one, describing in detail the formulation of the vaccine, the methods used in the field trial, and how the results were tallied. Finally, he came to the nut of the matter, the conclusion that the people in the room and the TV viewers around the world had shown up and tuned in to hear. The vaccine works, he declared straightforwardly. It is safe, it is effective, and it is potent. And with that, a hinge turned in the history of medicine. Less than 7 months later, on November 9th, 1955, according to a vaccine card I found among my mother's personal effects after she passed in 2019, I, like millions of other American babies and children, received my first shot of the splendid solution Jonas Salk had spent so many years developing. Salk was not the only great scientist to put polio in his crosshairs, of course. 5 years after the great moment in Rackham Hall, the U.S. Surgeon General approved the administration of Albert Sabin's oral polio vaccine. Together, the two shots, the two formulations, have pushed polio over the edge of eradication around the world, or close to the edge of eradication around the world. In 1988, before Rotary International and other members of the Global Polio Eradication Initiative decided it was time for humanity to wipe out the scourge that had stalked children for so long, polio was endemic in 125 countries and killed or paralyzed an estimated 350,000 children each year. Today, 34 years and billions of vaccine doses later, the disease is endemic in just 2 countries, Afghanistan and Pakistan, where just 19 cases of wild polio have occurred so far in 2022. Of course, 19 cases is 19 too many, because polio is a uniquely wicked disease. The very thing that defines small children is their wild, tireless kinetic energy, their inability to sit still, their need to run and leap and hop and play. Polio targets that variability and snatches it away from them forever. All diseases are cruel things. Polio may be the only one that seems to come with a sense of spite. It's for that reason that it's so important that the work of Rotary International and the rest of its GPEI partners continues to go forward. The oral vaccine, which is the one most widely administered around the world because of its low cost and ease of administration, has prevented an estimated 16 million cases of polio and saved an estimated 1.5 million lives since 1988. But the live attenuated vaccine used in its formulation can, on occasion, revert to virulence, causing, in about 1 in 3 million doses, so-called vaccine-derived polio. Over the past 6 months, one such case of the disease has turned up in Rockland County, New York, and another in Jerusalem. and circulating vaccine-derived virus was found in the wastewater system of London. In the US and other wealthier countries, the oral vaccine has been phased out in favor of Salk's injectable variety, since it uses a killed virus to familiarize the body with polio and train the immune system to rise up in defense against a wild strain should it ever encounter it. The killed virus can never revert to virulence. The epidemiological numbers, of course, still favor the use of both Salk's shots and Sabin's drops, since even the slightly imperfect protection the oral vaccine provides is better than no protection at all. And the numbers, too, continue to favor the inexhaustible work being done around the globe by Rotary International. In 2018, I was privileged to travel to Nigeria with a Rotary team to witness those efforts firsthand. I was present at the naming ceremony of a week-old baby named Ramlatu Musa, a naming ceremony attended by a crowd of friends and family members in the heart of the city of Kano. Rotary and UNICEF teams took the opportunity of so many families gathered in one place to vaccinate the children present, and I had the opportunity to give Ramlatu the first of several doses that she, like the other children, would receive over the course of her early childhood. Later that day, I watched as mothers, children, and volunteer health workers gathered in another local home to discuss the importance of getting children vaccinated and issues of childhood health in general. I was present as well in a men's-only meeting in a mosque where fathers discussed the importance of vaccinations and stood to promise that they would not leave their children unprotected. I learned, too, of the small acts of heroism displayed by dignitaries in the local community who have put themselves forward to keep the vaccine campaign pressing ahead. In 2016, the polio vaccine was available in Nigeria, but it was being frequently rejected by families due to stray rumors that continued to circulate, claiming that it was unsafe, able to kill children or render them infertile, or even that it contained HIV. So before one of that year's national vaccination campaigns began, a local emir appeared at a public ceremony and called for a vial of polio vaccine to be brought to the stage. With the audience watching, he broke the seal and drank down its entire contents. And with that, vaccine resistance in Nigeria retreated one more step. Since then, polio has been declared officially eradicated in Nigeria, ridding the entire African continent of the disease. Still, the struggle goes on, not only in the 2 remaining polio-endemic countries, but around the world to get children vaccinated and keep them safe from both the wild and vaccine-derived forms of the disease. In March of 2021, a newer, stabler formulation of the oral vaccine was approved, one in which the attenuated virus used in the drops is much less likely to lead to vaccine-derived polio, thanks to genetic engineering that requires the virus to go through 4 or 5 different mutations rather than just a single one to revert to its virulent state. So far, thanks to Rotary and others, 450 million doses of the new vaccine have been administered in 22 countries. But Rotary will not rest, and UNICEF will not rest, and the CDC will not rest, and the World Health Organization will not rest, and the emirs and imams and field workers and educators and other volunteers working all over the world will not rest until the polio virus, like the smallpox virus before it, is pushed over the cliff of extinction, eliminated forever across the globe, never able to touch or hurt a blameless child again. Polio is a stubborn and powerful disease, but the human will to wipe it out is all the more so. It is a privilege today to be able to tell my story and the larger story of the anti-polio campaign in general to a room full of so many people who were involved heroically in that great fight. Thank you very much.
My name is Gordon Owens, and I'm the District Governor nominee from District 6900. Thank you, Jeffrey. With a lifetime of experience in communications, you've shared a great deal we can learn from today. Your interest in Dr. Salk and his polio vaccine is especially important to Rotarians as we are this close to eradicating polio. Knowing your very busy schedule, we're grateful that you're willing to share your time with us this weekend. Although little birdie told me this may be your hometown, so it's not such a stretch to be here.
Baltimore.
And on behalf of Rotary International Director Jeremy Hurst, I'm pleased to award you with a Paul Harris Fellow.
Oh, thank you so much.
When matched with the Gates Foundation, this represents 5,000 polio vaccines going to children all around the world. So thank you very much for being here and sharing your story with us today. Everybody join me in congratulating Jeffrey.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. This is an honor.
Yes, thank you. I have a pin for you as well.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, this is a Paul Harris story. Oh, we're going to step out here.
Okay.
Here. We need a photo op.
Thank you so much.
Now switching gears, tonight is British Mania. And while a bit before the Beatles, England had one of the most influential statesmen of our time, Winston Churchill. Known for starting his day with a weak whiskey and for his pithy quotes, these well-known quotes are easily recognizable. Never, never, never give up. And we make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give. These, however prolific these may be, imagine if these were quotes from a district governor. Nothing in life is so exhilarating as to be shot at without result. The greatest lesson in life is to know that even fools are right sometimes. And you must put your head in the lion's mouth if the performance is to be a success. So let's see if George Robinson-Burnett will put his head in the lion's mouth. Please join me in welcoming him to the stage.
So Winston Churchill, I think he could teach us quite a number of lessons. So that's what I'm going to do this morning. He was indeed a keen consumer of my national beverage, by the way. In fact, President Roosevelt thought he was an alcoholic. But you have to put that in perspective, actually, because our nations look at alcohol a little bit differently. You know, if you go to a dinner party and somebody drinks 4 whiskeys in America, people are going, alcoholic. You drink 4 whiskeys in Scotland, they go, designated driver. There we are. There's Sir Winston, absolutely one. Did you know he was half American? Yeah, his mother was American. And the other thing about Winston you may not know is he was a very, very proud Rotarian. He was a member of the Rotary Club of London and was very proud to be part of Rotary. He's very famous for his pithy comments and quotes. So using some of these, we can figure out what sort of advice Winston would give to those charged with leading our districts today. And I'm going to offer some of these to you. So here's our first one. Tact is a way of telling someone to go to hell in such a way that they're looking forward to the journey. So always try to be diplomatic. Success consists of going from failure to failure without losing enthusiasm. Set your goals, but be flexible. Nothing in life is so exhilarating as to be shot at without result. Get ready for the unexpected. Americans will always do the right thing, but only after having tried all the alternatives. So don't be afraid to try new things. A popular colleague said to Winston, "Can I borrow tuppence to phone a friend?" Immediately, Winston retorted, "Here's fourpence, why don't you phone both of them?" And that tells us to budget and use our resources wisely. Courage is what it takes to stand up and speak. It is also what it takes to sit down and listen. Isn't that a great one? So be a good listener. Here's my favorite. Nancy Astor said, "Winston, if you were my husband, I'd poison your tea." Winston replied, "Nancy, if you were my wife, I'd drink it." And the moral of that is never, ever lose your sense of humor. So Winston's very famous for saying, about showing that he was a Rotarian at heart. And what he said here, you make a living by what you earn. You make a life by what you give. Thank you so much. I look forward to getting your Brit on tonight. God bless the Queen. God save the King. Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage past Rotary International Director John Smarge from Rotary District 6960.
Good morning. My name is John Smarge, and I am a proud 40-year member of the Rotary Club of Naples, Florida. A Rotarian since 1992, trustee Aziz Memon has been leading Rotary's polio eradication efforts in Pakistan for the past several years, working with our partners and our stakeholders. In this role, he has been instrumental, overseeing a reduction of cases to 8 in 2018 and 1 wild polio case in 2021. Ladies and gentlemen, we are this close to eradicating polio. And I say we are this close because of all of you, all of us, in our efforts, and especially to the efforts of this man. He is a member of the International Polio Plus Committee and has chaired Pakistan's National Polio Plus Committee for the last 8 years. It is my privilege today to have a conversation with Rotary Foundation trustee Aziz Memon, who has achieved so much in his life. I ask you to take a look at the program and see the professional, the business, the humanitarian career of this man. Please give a warm welcome, a warm 33-34 welcome to Trustee Foundation Trustee Aziz Memon. Aziz, please. Thanks for coming here today. Thanks for being at our institute. I hope you've enjoyed the folks so far this weekend. You have been committed to eradicating polio for a lot of years. Tell us how doing this has been a primary motivator in your Rotary journey, if I may.
Well, John, my Rotary journey started the same time, I think. You started in 1992?
81.
81. No, okay, I started in 1992. And it happened this way that the National Polio Plus Committee chairs, before me, both of them, late past District Governor Qasim Dada and PDG late Hai Khan, were from my own club. And those were the days when the NIDs and the SNIDs used to be an event the whole club used to participate. So getting into Rotary was getting into action for polio eradication, and it continues till today.
It's interesting because your experience, you were able to see firsthand the delivery of our products, the delivery of the mission of Rotary in your country. That's outstanding. There have no doubt been some interesting challenges around the world, and especially some interesting challenges in the country of Pakistan in the delivery of our polio eradication efforts. Maybe give us some examples, some stories from your experiences of what it's been like.
I have some stories, but before that, let's go back a little bit, John, that in 2003, 2004, we were much ahead of India. Sri Lanka had eradicated polio much earlier for the primary reason that their literacy rate was higher. India been able to clean up the south 5 states, again for the reason that the literacy rate in south of India was higher than the other parts. They got stuck up in Bihar and UP. We were doing fine, you know. At that time, we used to have 3, 4 cases. And India at that time used to have, in 4 digits, 6,000, 7,000 cases. So India used to be a challenge. It was thought that Pakistan was taken for granted, that we will sail through. But then with the invasion of USSR, I don't know how many in the hall would know, the USSR, Union of Soviet Social Republic, into Afghanistan, and disrupting the demography of the region with the migration, and then with the creation of the Talibans and the flooding of the weapons. So it disturbed the whole thing. And we are bearing the brunt of that, fighting. And if you look at the cases, you know, if you look at the cases in last 10 years, 12 years, 90% plus cases, wild polio plus cases in our region are from a community called Pashtun community. And there, the female literacy is 2% or low. When the Taliban took over Afghanistan, one thing they did was they closed the schools for the girls. About 8 years back, attending a World Health Assembly in Cairo, the health minister of Palestine remarked after my speech that I was wrong blaming the insurgency. The actual reason was that our mothers were not literate. They were not ready to welcome and open the doors to the vaccinators. They were ready to shut the doors because they did not know that by shutting the doors on the vaccinators, what they were doing. This continues till today, and today if you look at it, after going through about 16 months with no wild polio case, with no positive sample, we got some issues right in the north. Southern KP, a part of North Waziristan, the tribal mountainous terrain, a small village, you know, where hardly enough population, but the refusal started from there. So far, we have been able to contain the virus in that region, but we hope we do so and overcome that. The reasons are political, blackmailing, religious. So we have come through a long range, long issues, and we hope that we will be able to overcome it. And fulfill the promise of making the world polio-free.
Talk about the issues in Pakistan with maybe the Taliban and how I know you've had some personal interaction.
Yes,
Talk about that.
definitely. You know, one thing, John, is that in the early days, the refusals were chronic refusals. Now, if you will find time and speak to President Jennifer Jones, who spent 9 days in Pakistan, spending time with the frontline workers, she will tell you that they are more demand-driven. There could be an element of blackmailing in it, but more demand-driven, a desire to have clean drinking water. Nothing wrong in it. Rotary has been putting up so many plants. When President Jennifer was there, she inaugurated one. And last week, when we had the former Rotary Vice President with us, she inaugurated one. So we keep on doing that. We keep our acts together. And but you know, earlier days, it used to be very, very chronic refusal. I'll just give you an example. About 9 years back in Quetta. Quetta is the capital of Balochistan, where it gets cold. In winter it is very cold. They do get snowfall also. So I was there for an NID in Quetta, and I was told that this family, one case, you know, one child has got white polio. The father is refusing to give drops to the second one. I asked, what does the father do? They said that he's a taxi driver. And she's taxi, that old taxi is there, that means he's home. I said, can I go in? The UNICEF people who were with me, they said, let's ask the permission. I went home and it was a small hut sort of a house. And he welcomed me nicely. I was wearing a black jacket because it was cold. So we sat down, we chatted. And I asked him about his business. So he said he is a taxi, big challenge. Too much work because it's getting old. I said, you know, there are schemes. I run some NGOs other than Rotary, where we will take back this taxi from you and give you a new one so that you can make a earning. So he said, okay, I'll keep your number with me and I will call you. I said, you're more than welcome. Then we looked at the children. I said, your one child is got affected. And now the second one, you know, let's save him. He said, I've got no objection. You have come here to give him opioid drops? I said, yes, why not? We want to save him. We want him to run. So he said, on one condition. I said, what is that? So, you know, he took out a small gun, pistol, put it on the coffee table. I said that, first you have to shoot me. I said, you must be joking. In the whole of my life, I have not killed a fly. And you want me to shoot you? Keep it with you. I don't want. You want to give drops? Fine. I'll go away. And then while, you know, chatting with him in the early, you know, when he mentioned about driving the cab in the night, in the cold of Quetta, I offered my leather jacket to him and I said, try it out how it fits you. It fitted him. I said, you keep this with me. So when we decided that he is not going to give the drops and the talks are over, he started taking out the leather jacket. He said that I'll return this back. I said, no. There was no deal like that. That if you will not give drops to your son, I'll take the jacket back. This is yours. keep it with you. And that promise also to replace your old taxi with the new one at no cost stands there. There is nothing, we are friends. Then, he said that you're a nice man, but can I ask you one question? I said, yes, what is it? Why are you working for CIA? I said, no. Why would CIA give me a job? I'm myself an industrialist. I employ almost 5,000 people. And then he touched this black jacket and said that this black jacket, I said, this black jacket is not given by CIA, my friend. This is made in Pakistan. Have a look inside. Who has made it? How did you get all this in your mind? He said, Dr. Shakil Afridi. I said, Dr. Shakil Afridi and me, I've got nothing in common with him. I've not met him in my life. Go and ask him what he had in his mind, why he did all that. I'm a simple man. I care for your family, that's why I'm here. And I'm going away. But you have my numbers. Whenever you need my help, I'm available to you. But remember this thing, that I am not working for CIA. Then his color changed. He said, okay, if I give the permission, will you give the polio drops? I said, now I have got some conditions. Like you gave the put-up conditions. It will not be just your child. You will come with me in the street, wherever there is a refusal, because of that blockade of mind. We'll give drops to everyone. He said, yes, we'll do. We'll start. So, these things, those were the days, John, when the refusals were very, very chronic. Now, things have changed. It is, refusals are there, more on demand-driven. Jennifer Jones rightly pointed out that the heat, flooding was not there at that time. The heat, when our summer temperatures goes to 52 degrees, that means 123 Fahrenheit. These vaccinators need an umbrella, they need a flask. They give in smaller quantities, but across the board now we are working out to see how they could be provided. Now, while talking of that, and talking of Quetta, once in winter, when I was there for an SNID, I saw a lady having pieces of cloth wrapped on his feet. I told the officer that, she's unwell, her feet. He said, no, it's not like that. Because in the snow, they get the snow bites. They don't have shoes. They wear sandals. They wear slippers. Same day, we arranged through few friends money to send a huge shipment of the Bata shoes. So Rotarians keep on doing that.
It's interesting, from where we are, our perspective, right? We talk about the polio eradication efforts and what it takes for it to happen. And we think here, a lot of us is just giving money, but you think, here you are at the front line doing whatever is necessary, person by person, family by family, community by community, to make sure this effort has gone through. It's amazing to me. Now, I imagine, we talk about templates. We've learned a lot of investment in time, a lot of investment in resources in its polio eradication, but it has lingering effects outside of polio eradication. How has it been in Pakistan with COVID? Have you used some of the same thought process, same technologies?
You see, as we have seen the graphs coming up and down, sometime when North-South Waziristan was taken over, I'll come to COVID in a while. So when whole of North and South Waziristan was with the Taliban, Osama bin Laden was alive, And after returning from Peshawar, I met my friend Jeffrey Kluger, and I just mentioned to him that he gave me a whole page and wrote a story which I narrated to him. And that was that during those days, I had gone to Lady Reading Hospital, which is a very old hospital in Peshawar, to donate some wheelchairs. While talking to the administrator, I saw a gentleman sitting in the corner with a small child having tea. So I told the administrator, who's that? He said, he's one of the Taliban leaders. Don't go close to him. I said, why? I've been talking to them. What's wrong? He said, no, be here with me. I said, no, I just take my cup of tea and go to him. I went to him. I had a chat with him. He seems to be a nice person. And his boy, 18-month boy, he was crawling there. So I told him, if we would have given him 2 OPV, it could have saved him. At that moment, that second, the color of the gentleman, they are very fair like you. The color changed to red. And he looked at me sharply, and then I could see the ammunitions all. And he said that, what are you? Are you God? I said, no. I'm hardly a good human being. How can I be God? He said, how can you predict that my son would have been saved with these 2 drops? I said, it is common sense, This disease doesn't have a cure, but has prevention. No, I don't believe all that. I said, okay, but then, I don't want to see this gun of yours. I'm your guest here. I'm having tea. I'll go away. You don't want, so what? The child, crawling came towards me, and I picked him up and put him on my lap. I had that biscuit also, gave him a little biscuit. Then I told this gentleman, the Taliban leader, that this room is heated and he's wearing 2 sweaters. I take out one. So he looked at me and he said, no, I'm coming from the mountains. It is very cold. And if I take out the sweater and I go back like that with him, my baby child may get cold, flu, pneumonia. He can die because of that. I said, but who told you this? Who told you all this will happen? Are you God? He was quiet. I said, you're making predictions. This will happen, this will happen, this will happen. So on the sofa, we were sitting next to each other. Slowly, I could see his hand move towards my hand, hold my hand and say, my friend, instead of 2, give him 4 drops. Will he walk? I said, see, I told you I'm not God. He will not walk. We will do physiotherapy. We will do corrective surgery. But to tell you that he'll be a normal child will not work. I may go away. I may not meet you again in the life. He said, what should I do? I said, this is a good question. I love this question. Go and tell your family, your friends, everyone that you were taken away by wrong notions, by religious leaders. OPV doesn't harm, doesn't kill, it saves lives. He said, okay, I'll give my baby 2 drops now, and you share your cell phone number with me. I'll go back home, do your work, and send you a message. But promise me that after receiving my message in a week, you delete my number. I said, I will do that. After a I did get a message. It was written in Urdu that, my friend, I have done your work. And as promised, I did delete his number. So these are the lessons, they are learned, but little too late. And now you mentioned about the Taliban and putting an embargo on OPB after the killing of Osama bin Laden. Now those were the days, when North and South Waziristan in one single year reported 380 wild polio cases. Not from the whole country, just North and South Waziristan. After the killing and after 9/11, Army went into operation. They cleared up North-South Waziristan. To a greater extent, it has been cleared up. But there are, areas, pockets still around where they crop up, create mischiefs, use the 4G, MG, saying that OPB kills, stops NID campaigns. So these things we are facing will continue, but we can tell you one thing, that the resolve of the frontline workers, resolve of the Rotarians is with full commitment. We are not this close, but we are very close, and we hope to get over these things. And very, very soon, I don't know how much time we have, but can we have 5 minutes?
We could listen to you all day in the stories. We have to stop now, but I will say to you that, and I guess parenthetically to all of our governor chain out here, Aziz could have sat here and given us facts and figures, right? Could have talked about all the processes and all the logistics of what it takes to do this. But through the power of storytelling, I'm touched by what you do. I think our Rotarians are touched. I'm proud to be part of an organization that counts Aziz Memon as one of them. Ladies and gentlemen, please thank Aziz Memon.
I will, just one please, one last thing. Please, thank you. The last incident, a small one, 2 years back, I was talking of 3G, 4G. Gadap, is a larger slum area. She's been there in and out, Now she knows Gadap more better than anyone else. So there was a health camp and I was there, and it had rained in the night. So there was water in it. And as I was going through, I saw a girl, about 11 years old, wearing rubber slippers, 2 sizes bigger than her, carrying an old LG phone and coming behind. I ignored again. So I saw, then I called her, I said that, can I help you? She said, no. I said, you want fees, school fees, books? She said, I started going again. Then when I finished my round there and I was supposed to go to another camp, I turned back and I saw that girl again. I said, now you have to come and tell me, what's the problem? You want anything? She said, yes, one thing. I want to have a selfie with you. I said, you'll have a selfie with me. You want me to sit down? It will be a difficult task, but I'll do. I did. Then I said, what are you going to do with it? You'll post it to the Facebook. She said, yes. I said, but you don't want any help from me. Then what? Why? What for? She said, you cannot help me. How will you help me? Because my 4-year-old brother is already a polio victim. You can't do anything for him. But I admire the work you do to save the life of other children. That's why I follow you. I pray for you. I asked her name, and she gave her name, Iman. I still remember it because Iman means trust. And she went away. I kept standing. I said I couldn't reply to her. She made me helpless. So, and then, my thought to you, the Rotarians who are giving so much of money, is that to how many Imans we will have to reply that we are helpless, that when her brother got affected, we were helpless. So we need to finish it once and for all, and then there will not be positive derived samples in New York or London, and it will be done. Thank you.
Thank you. Sometime this weekend, please shake the hand of a Rotary hero. Thank you.
Good morning, fellow Rotarians. My name is Neil Sneider, and I am proud to serve as District Governor of District 6960. Thank you so much, Trustee Aziz, for such an insightful and delightful journey in your involvement in the polio efforts in Pakistan and beyond. I never realized, well, first of all, the power of storytelling. Was a wonderful, wonderful story to tell. I never realized that literacy was an earlier barrier to polio eradication in India. And I never realized, because I think of mass inoculations, I never realized that in Pakistan it started as a person-to-person, door-to-door effort. So thank you so very much for that. When we received notification that you would be our Rotary Foundation representative, we were thrilled, and your presence is nothing short of inspiring. Thank you. And thank you, past RI Director John Smarge, for being an outstanding interviewer. Your questions and commentary were very insightful. And I can't help but think that you may have a role in President Jennifer's media company. So now, and President Jennifer, I've heard that as well. Now, if you would please welcome to the stage past District Governor John Spillman.
I'm excited to introduce our next speaker. His topic is stories over statistics. This topic is important because to fulfill Rotary's vision statement, and I'll quote, "Together we see a world where people unite and take action to create lasting change across the globe, in our communities and in ourselves. We must inspire people to join our cause." Our speaker, David Forward, served back-to-back years as governor of District 7500. And David has written several books chronicling Rotary's inspiring history, namely A Century of Service, the story of Rotary International, Doing Good in the World, the inspiring story of Rotary Foundation's first 100 years, and his newest Rotary book, which will be available in the House of Friendship, and he'll sign with all proceeds going to the Rotary Foundation, A String of Pearls, Extraordinary Examples of How Rotary Peace Fellows are Serving Humanity and Changing the World. Please give a warm Rotary welcome to Bass District Governor David Forward.
I mean, I'm supposed to be here today to communicate about how we can tell Rotary's stories, and it's true, we do learn about things from stories. I would actually venture that most people around the world really have no idea of the background of their national anthems. Certainly, I don't know where God Save the Queen or God Save the King originated, but I would also say there's not a single child in America that wouldn't be able to tell you the origins of the American national anthem that started right here in Baltimore. Of course, they have it wrong, because as somebody like Jeremy, who was educated in England, I can tell you that this is really just a question of alternative facts. We know from our English lessons in school about American history, and they were very short because, frankly, America didn't really have that much history compared to ours. But we know from our American history lessons that the true fact was that Francis Scott Key wanted to get invited onto this British battleship to have afternoon tea. And then he decided just to spend the night. And so this whole story about him being taken captive and looking through the portholes and seeing by the dawn's early light that the flag was still there is not necessarily the true story that's told around the world. But the fact is, it's a story that has resonated with millions and millions of Americans. Stories do make us remember the facts, don't they? I was at a funeral recently of a very dear Rotarian who had tragically died in a car accident. The entire funeral was a celebration of life, of all the amazing things he had done in the community and for his fellow man, most of which were through Rotary. And it left us for days and days afterwards thinking, what would be the stories that people would tell at my memorial service? How could I do something today to be able to have such an impact that people will remember what I stood for in my life, what I was able to accomplish through my church and through Rotary and through other means, that people can then tell my stories. I mean, our presidential theme this year, one of the best of all times, is Imagine Rotary. We all can, well, I guess there's a lot of people from the South here, so I suppose you'd say, y'all can imagine Rotary. But if we're going to be effective at growing Rotary, at energizing and making regular members more involved in Rotary, then we need to be able to learn to tell our Rotary stories. Stories are an integral part of our everyday lives. How many of us have warm feelings today, many years later, of when our child said at bedtime, "Daddy, tell me a story"? Since people began to communicate, stories have been used to make a point or to drive an idea across to an audience. Stories make ordinary words and deeds come alive. They explain examples or points in a way that resonates with an audience. Listeners connect with stories emotionally, associating their feelings with their learning. There are love stories. There are scary stories. There are humorous stories. There are teaching stories. In my real estate school, all of our instructors use real stories from their experience as real estate brokers over the years to communicate the lessons that they have to learn in order to pass the real estate exam. One of the greatest storytellers of all time, of course, was Jesus. The stories he told, we just call them parables. How many people here today have learned life lessons because of those parables about the Good Samaritan or the prodigal son or the widow's mite? Now, y'all are Rotary's leaders. You have this important obligation to inspire those among your membership to strive for bigger, better opportunities to serve and for greater commitments to humankind through our Rotary Foundation. What should be the point of our Rotary stories? Well, they should include the what is Rotary stories, the why are we here and what do we do stories, the why should we become more engaged in Rotary stories, and certainly the why embracing the foundation should be a priority stories. I met a man in Houston during the convention who saw my convention badge and said, "What is Rotary?" And then he went on to tell me that he had asked another Rotarian the same question, And the person droned on and on and on about Rotary as the largest service organization in the world with 1.2 million members, and we're in 180 countries, and we've almost eradicated polio. And he said, I still don't know what's in it for me to join Rotary. He said, I just moved to Houston. I want to be part of the community. I love the concept of volunteerism. But he didn't know anything about joining Rotary because all this other gentleman had done was state the facts. He didn't sell the sizzle. And so you can see why I say that facts tell, but stories sell. When I joined Rotary 44 years ago, I asked my club president what the Rotary Foundation was. He said, oh, it's a fund that we all have to give $100 a year to just to keep the district governor off my back when he comes around on the official visit. Wow, I was inspired. But fast forward 8 years, and I was district chair of our very first polio campaign in the 1980s. How was I going to communicate to Rotarians about the need to buy into a campaign to raise $120 million when every Rotary club in my district had only ever had 50-50s or beef and beers or golf outings? We needed a story. I almost missed my flight on a business trip to Ethiopia because my son was in a track meet. It was the most amazing race. It was 5K, and in the last lap, he came from 11th place to win the race. The crowd was on their feet going crazy, and I raced up to Newark Airport to make the flight, and 4 days later, I was in this tiny little mountain village in Ethiopia called Lalibela. There are no paved streets in Lalibela. They're all dirt roads, and I was shocked to see dozens of crawlers. I'd only ever heard about crawlers at Rotary events, but here they were propelling themselves through the dust of the streets on their elbows and their withered limbs because polio was so endemic in Lalibela. And the next day, when I was waiting for my driver and translator to pick me up outside the hotel, I heard this wailing. It sounds like some of you are familiar with Muslim countries where you hear the imam doing the call to prayer, but this was a Christian community. And so I asked the translator when the car arrived, and he listened. He says, oh, they're calling all the women to bring their children to be vaccinated against polio. Polio? I'm involved with that thing back home. Could we go see? And he said, okay, we have a couple of minutes. And we went to the middle of the town, and there was a long line of mothers and older siblings holding their children. And at the front of the line was this big tree, and nailed to the tree was a poster, all written in Amharic, except there was the unmistakable logo of Rotary and Polio Plus. And there's a man in a white coat, and my translator explained to him what this weird-looking guy was doing there, and without even asking, he just took the next little boy out of his mother's arms and put him in my arms, and then gave me a little vial and gestured to put 2 drops into the baby's mouth. And this little baby is looking up at me, and big brown eyes, and my hands were shaking as I dropped 2 drops into the baby's mouth. And the translator's going like this, and I got into the back of the car, and we're going down this winding mountain road to the desert airstrip, and I'm in the back seat crying because I thought back to 4 days earlier where I got the exhilaration of such a proud dad watching his son win a race, and I realized that child's dad loves him every bit as much as I love my son. And that child, whom I will never know who his name is, that child will never be a crawler on the streets of Lalibela. I had my polio story to tell my district. How can we be better at Rotary storytellers? Every one of us has pondered that question when we became club president or district governor or even in higher offices. One of my most cherished memories when I was researching a century of service was of the day I spent with George Means. George Means was the very first employee of the Rotary Foundation. He was hired by Rotary in 1935. He went on to become Rotary's General Secretary from 1953 to 1972. Now imagine all the great Rotary programs and projects that have started in the period from 1953 to 1972. And I met George as a very, very old man in his retirement home in Indiana, and spent the entire day with him. And I asked him to share with me stories about Rotary that he had that most people don't know. And he told me the story of Paul Harris. See, he said there wasn't enough work for a full-time employee of the Rotary Foundation in 1935. Hard to believe, isn't it? So he said, the General Secretary said, well, listen, go help Paul Harris, because he doesn't have a secretary. So in the afternoons, go help him. And Paul, of course, had lots of speaking engagements, and he said Paul went down to Woolworth's, right close to the office in Chicago, and he bought this little cheap pewter galleon for 10 cents at Woolworth's. And he said whenever Paul would come back from a speaking engagement, inevitably with a plaque, Paul would say, hey, George, stand up on a chair with you and drive a nail into the wall so you can hang the plaque. And he said, we never did have a hammer in the office, so I would use the bottom of this little pewter galleon to drive nails into the wall. And he said, on the night before Paul died, I was at his bedside. And he knew that I was on track to become General Secretary of Rotary. And he said, George, I want you to have the ship. This, George, is the good ship Rotary. He said, notice that her sails are full. That means she has a sense of purpose. She's going somewhere. She has a solid sense of direction. George, I want you to take the tiller of the good ship Rotary and make sure she always stays the right course. And then this old man was silent for a moment. And he said, I never presided over a board of directors meeting or an RI convention when I did not have the good ship Rotary by my side. And then George said to me, David, reach up, would you, to the top of the bookshelf there and get that thing down. And I stood up as high as I could and found what he's talking about is this little pewter galleon. And he said, this is the good ship Rotary. I want it to go to the archives of Rotary International. And 6 weeks later, George Means was dead. Now, honestly, the truth is, I can't remember a single lesson that I learned at the International Assembly. That's not criticizing the International Assembly. I just can't remember it. It was a blur. But I will tell you this, there was never a goal that I set. There was never a program or a project that I launched in my years as district governor when I was not influenced by that story that I learned from George Means. Everything that we did that year, I would think, am I helping to keep a firm hand on the tiller of the good ship Rotary in District 7500? I don't write books because I want to be a statistic. I write because I love to tell stories, whether it's in speaking at district conferences or whatever, or telling them through my writing. I think that a perfect example of communications is something that happened with the Rotary Peace Fellows. The truth is, up until the year I was governor, I could speak for 2 hours about youth exchange, group study exchange, the Rotary Foundation, you name it. But if you asked me to give you any detailed talk about the Rotary Peace Centers program, I think I'd probably have been stumped after 2 minutes. And so, as sitting governor, I was in Calgary, Canada, having breakfast with a dear friend who's a past district governor, now a member of the Board of Trustees. And she was on the Peace Center's Major Gifts Committee, and she was bemoaning the fact that they didn't have any decent handouts to give to potential major donors for the Peace Centers. And so I said, well, Marty, why don't you write a book? And before I knew it, she said, "That's a great idea, David. Why don't you?" And I said, no, you're misunderstanding. And so you cannot say no to Marty. She's just one of those people. And so within an hour, we were with President John Durham and said, "What do you think of the idea?" Now, let me tell you something about John Durham. He is cheap. Right? He is really tight. And so he's visionary, but he's cheap. And so out of his words came the response, "I think it's a fantastic idea. Can you do it at no cost to Rotary?" And so within 2 weeks, I was on an airplane traveling around the world to interview some of these amazing people who are today Rotary Peace Centers, visiting the professors in the Rotary Peace Centers as far away as Tokyo. Now, honestly, that experience changed my life. And it's my prayer that the stories can change your life, to persuade you to see the value of including the peace centers in your foundation commitment. I interviewed a wonderful young Australian called Stephanie Woolard. Stephanie was up in Kathmandu on vacation, and she saw disabled women going into this little hut. Why would they go into this little hut? She had more guts than I did. She followed them. And she found out that a woman, especially a disabled woman in Tibet and Nepal, are considered the lowest of the low caste. They literally are spat at on the streets. And so Stephanie realized that these women have a lot of skills. Some of them are painters. Some of them make arts and crafts. And so Stephanie, before she flew home to Melbourne, created this foundation called 7 Women. And today, this amazing Rotary Peace Center has encouraged them to make all these arts and crafts that are just stunning, beautiful. And then she brings them back to Australia and sells them, and every single cent goes back to these women. Over 5,000 disabled women now, all over Kathmandu, now are able to hold their heads up high, to pay for their children's education. One woman said, "Before this, I used to feel like I was a burden to this earth. I felt like I may as well be dead. But now I feel I am here for my children, to be a good mother, and to see that they have a good education." All of that started because of a Rotary Peace Fellow. It would be easy to dismiss this work in faraway lands as being something that we don't know about, we don't really care about, it's not my problem. But that's not the way Rotarians feel, is it? In Myanmar, I met Nainko Ko. At the age of 15, he participated in a student protest, and they jailed him. They abused him physically and mentally. After 2 years in jail, he was able to escape and crossed over the border, very dangerous border, into Thailand. And while he was there, he happened to meet a Rotarian from New Zealand who essentially adopted him, was able to get him back to New Zealand, got a university education, was accepted as a Rotary Peace Fellow in Brisbane, Australia, and today is back in that terribly dangerous country where I met him, trying to teach democracy. Well, Rotary has no armies. We don't have any hordes of blue-helmeted peacekeeping troops. We have no tanks, we have no guns, but we are equipping hundreds of people from every nation in peace and conflict resolution skills that on a local level can help bring peace to the world, one person at a time. I used the book, A String of Pearls, not to raise money for the foundation, $30 at a time, and certainly not for personal benefit. I use it to tell the stories that will inspire us to believe that in Rotary we can bring about a world with less suffering, with less conflict, with less hatred, whether a disabled women in Kathmandu or refugees from the Ukraine or in remote camps in the Congo. There is no greater imperative than peace. None. If there's no peace, there's no point in digging clean drinking water wells or providing educational resources for the children. I've served in war zones. I've sat in fear as mortars landed all around me in Beirut, hoping for the ceasefire long enough for the Royal Air Force to get in and evacuate us in the morning. I've sat at checkpoints as rebels demanded ID and praying that my ID was not one that would get me pulled out of the car and shot. Just a month ago, I drove an ambulance to Ukraine and saw the agony on the faces of ruined lives of so many innocent people. I leave on Tuesday to deliver a second ambulance to Ukraine. Our ambulances are taken to Kharkiv, the second most heavily shelled city in the country. The Russians have bombed apartment buildings and even the children's hospital there. People don't understand people who don't understand Rotarians ask, why would you go to personal expense and trouble to do things like that? And my final story, it makes the point of how Rotarians see these people in distress around the world. It's a story I told in the book that happened in Sarajevo during a particularly awful part of that dreadful civil war that ripped Bosnia apart. A reporter was capturing the scene during a horrific firefight between the Serbs and the Bosnians where they were shooting at anything that moved. And suddenly the reporter saw a little girl dart across a courtyard trying to run home. She was immediately cut down by a sniper's bullet. A man raced up behind the little girl and scooped her up. How am I going to get her to the hospital, he said. The reporter had a car, and for a moment he stopped being a reporter and started being a humanitarian. Quick, he said, I have my car right here. And as they raced through the streets, the man holding the little girl in the back seat said, hurry, my friend, my child is still alive. And then, hurry, my friend, my child is still breathing. A moment later, hurry, my friend, my child is still warm. As bullets tore into the car, amazingly missing the passengers, the reporter heard the man call out even more urgently, hurry, my friend, my child is getting cold. And finally, through sobs, he said, oh my God, my child is not breathing. As they washed the blood and the dirt off their hands in the hospital bathroom, the stranger said, this is the worst day in my life. Now I will have to tell my best friend that his precious daughter is dead. The reporter said, wait a minute, I thought she was your child. The man hung his head and said sorrowfully, no, but aren't they all our children? This is how Rotarians see the children of the world. What is Rotary? We're asked all the time. Rotary is a group of men and women of every race, creed, color, and religion who say all the world's children are our children, and we will not rest until we've cured polio, provided them with clean environments, and used every effort to create a more peaceful world. What are Rotarians? We are ordinary people with an extraordinary commitment to make the stories like these so inspiring, because in their hearts, Rotarians sing the song that gives each one of us hope for the future. Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. May God bless every one of you with stories that can bring this vision to reality so that the whole world can imagine Rotary. Thank you. God bless you.
Good morning, fellow Rotarians. I am Dominique Barzin, District Governor nominee from 7020. On behalf of the Rotary Leadership Zone 3324, I want to say thank you, David. Many of us own the books you have written about our great organization. Many heard you speak. But for all of us, today was a real treat. What a tremendous presentation. The session on telling your story was full of insights and inspiration for us. It was to share the amazing stories of changed life, both ours and those we seek to serve. Fellow Rotarians, please continue to tell your stories. That's what will grab the attention of others. Don't forget, as David just told us, facts tell, but stories sell the power of Rotary. Closing announcement, sorry to say, very short break. Please be back in your seat, 10:30, for another fantastic session. And as soon as the next session ends at noon, please exit the room as fast as possible because they will have to prepare this room for lunch. Thank you so much and have a nice break.